Ladies and gentlemen, it is your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs, and boy, am I excited to be here. To be honest with you, a little bit nervous. After all this time, it never gets easier. Today is a special day. We are a week later than expected, commemorating the sinking of the Empress of Ireland. For good reason, we put a lot of work into making the documentary for all of you guys last week in time for the sinking, as well as the real-time animation that we've got out. I can see everybody saying hi. It's great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining. This is going to be a little bit of a different stream to usual. Normally, there'd be a lot more kind of back and forth with the audience, and we still will have time for that. But today we've got a bit more of a structured program. We're going to be talking about the history of the Empress of Ireland and where she came from and how she kind of ended up in the state that she did. And I say we because, rather excitingly, for the first time on a Oceanliner Designs live stream, I'm joined by guests. And these are very special guests, in fact. This is the Oceanliner Designs team, and it is a debut for both of them. Neither of these two gents have been in a live stream before. First off the rank, we've got probably the... I mean, you're looking at his work right now. You're looking at a combination of all of our work. We all kind of chipped in to brought it to life. I'm not sure if my stream may have just temporarily disconnected, but if we're back, then that works for me. Australian internet. Everything's upside down. Sometimes the cables get disconnected. Mr. Jack Gibson is from Britain. He is our animator, and he is a absolutely brilliant artist. You're seeing his work now. Jack, you're on the stream. How are you?
I'm quite nervous, but very excited. It's an honor being here, to be honest. Because I mean, I've been watching you since your first video on Lusitania, the tour around your drawing.
Oh,
So being here is quite bizarre, but it's really exciting to be here.
well, we're really excited to have you because, as I was saying, your work is absolutely spectacular. We've worked really closely building the Empress of Ireland documentary. We've got like quite a good workflow. We stay up all weird hours of the night talking on Discord, swapping files and trying to get the animations ready. But we'll hear a bit more about your work in a minute. Obviously, we'll be talking through how we made the graphics for the movie, and then we'll be commentating our real time syncing, which you put together. Second guest that we've got with us today is a absolute gun researcher, and somebody who can model interiors of ships like nobody I've ever seen. Mr. Liam Sharpe. Liam, how are you?
Hey Mike, it's an honor to be here. I'm doing great. Very excited to be here, and I'm very excited to see that everyone's showing up. So I'm very excited to be here.
It's great to have you. Really, really good. We've kind of worked together now a few weeks building these things, and yeah, again, I'm really proud to have you guys here as my team, and this is very exciting. Liam, you've had a big interest in kind of like 19th century ships for a long time. What would you say is your favorite 19th century ship, or do we leave that as a surprise for later on?
Oh, I want to leave. I think I might want to leave that one as a surprise for a little bit later down the road. But I will say that I have two favorite 19th century ships, both of them being approximately mid-century. One of them being a White Star Liner, some of you might know. The other being an Allen Liner.
Interesting. All right. Well, if anyone in the comments can guess those two before we get to them, then fair play. Meanwhile, Jack, you're over at Titanic, Honor, and Glory, who are we have a close collaboration with. Would we be having to guess what your favorite ship from history would be?
Oh, I don't think you have to guess that one. Four funnels, two masts, not enough lifeboats. Quite a big ship. I'll let the audience guess or what ship that might be.
Brilliant. I mean, it's been exciting working on this one because it's kind of a little bit outside our our comfort zones. It's similar to Titanic, but not quite. It's drawing on lessons from 19th century ships, but it's not a 19th century ship. You know what I mean? So I don't know about you guys, but I had a lot of fun learning about this, and I think we all kind of fell in love with it a little bit, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, before this stream, I knew the Empress of Ireland, and I was like, oh, it's that ship that has two funnels. That's all I knew. And within the last 3 weeks, I've gone from knowing that to her being my favorite ship to the point where I'm looking for scale models on eBay because I need one
And
because
yeah,
she's just
that's
a
part of
good ship.
the tragedy of this ship is that it was kind of buried to history, and although you can find 1,001 different scales of Titanic and even Lusitania, there's a couple Lusitania kits out, but yeah, the Empress is long forgotten by model making companies and probably the general public for certain. So
Yeah, there's not much on her.
yeah, it's kind of a bit sad. But anyway, we've put work into bringing it back to life. And what we're going to do, we've got a bit of a structure to this program today. I'm just going to give a little bit of brief background on the Empress of Ireland's origin story. She was the brainchild of the Canadian Pacific Railway, which we mentioned in the documentary, and that's just a bizarre, fascinating company. And somebody in a comment on the video actually told me off a little bit for being too kind of like in reverence of this company, because they were saying that they achieved their success at the at other people's severe detriment, where they had like thousands of workers building this railway that spanned Canada and in horrible conditions and kind of like just having an awful time. So fair play. Obviously, I feel like that was almost like standard labor practice for the 19th century. It just seemed like everybody was kind of dying at work. But anyway, this company builds a railway spanning the North American continent, and then has agreements in place with the British government to build a regular mail steamer service running between Liverpool and Eastern Canada, and then even over on the West Coast, spanning across the Pacific. So I think very famously, you could travel across the world without once stepping foot off of a Empress, one of like the Empress class ships. They had a lot of Empress ships as well. The Empress of Japan, quite famous. There were a couple of Empress of Britons, but you could do the whole thing without stepping foot off of a Canadian Pacific ship, which is genuinely unbelievable for that period of time. For a single company to be able to do that is amazing. But it was that transatlantic route from Liverpool to Eastern Canada that needed a advanced, fairly modern pair of sister ships to maintain a regular service and to really provide a new standard of luxury. And that's where the Empress sisters came in. And probably the person who can speak best to their standards of comfort and what they brought to the table is Mr. Liam Sharpe.
Hey everybody, so I would like to quickly talk about what the interiors of the Empress ships were like. Now, these ships were extraordinarily comfortable for the time. They were considered B-tier liners for the time, but in spite of that, they were extremely comfortable, extremely luxuriously decorated, and I would like to walk you through, deck by deck, what the ship had in store for its passengers. So for a start, each Empress ship had 46,700 square feet of mahogany that was installed within the ship. Now you got to keep in mind how many forests were decimated for these ships. I mean, 46,700 square feet of mahogany. That's
It's
extraordinarily,
unbelievable.
truly, if you think about it. Oh, absolutely. Now, each of these ships had a fine mix of these woods. You had mahogany, teak, satinwood, alderwood, bird's eye maple, etc. There were quite a diverse amount of wood that was inside these ships. So the upper promenade deck was very exclusive to first class passengers. At the forward end, you would have cabins, and the top level of the grand staircase, which featured a very large well and a stained glass dome above it. There was also a circular shaped couch that was at the very aft end of the staircase. Further aft was a buffer zone of cabins between the music room and the staircase. When you arrive into the music room, It's perhaps one of the centerpieces of the ship. It's located directly above the first class saloon. And inside this music room, you had this beautiful stained glass skylight and dome that was connected to it. You had a piano, you had very luxurious plush furniture, etc. Further aft, you would find more accommodation where one might notice that the accommodation that was located further aft and throughout the entirety of the ship, pretty much, it was split up quite a bit. So for the starboard side accommodation, it would be reserved for gentlemen, and then the port side would be for the ladies. I find this very interesting because we can connect this to liners of the past, such as the Victorian liners, like the SS Atlantic, for an example. How the accommodation was essentially split up for specific groups of passengers. You would find the same thing aboard the Allen liner Hungarian as well, where you would have some parts of steerage and first class reserved for the gentlemen and some for the ladies. Below the deck, you would find more cabins and public spaces that were exclusive to the first class passengers on the lower promenade deck. You'd find the first class library, which was located at the forwardmost point of this superstructure, which was very beautifully decorated. After that was yet another buffer zone between the stairs and the library, which was again broken up based upon gender. Now, the staircase on this level contains plush sofas on each side of the vessel, and the staircase on this particular level is known because of the fact that a very famous image was taken of the staircase on this level. If you were to look up, for an example, Empress of Ireland Grand Staircase, it would be the first result image, essentially. Now, further aft was located the first class cafe, which was essentially a second level of the dining saloon. After this cafe, there was a long stretch of first cabin accommodation placed in the central point. In this central point as well, there was the first class bathrooms. And inside these bathrooms, they were very spacious for the time, which was very unusual aboard these ships. You would find water closets and community bathtubs. Now, something I want to note is that it was very, very rare for individual cabins on these ships to have individual bathtubs and private bathrooms, pretty much. It was almost unheard of at the time. So on most, if not all of these ships in this era, passengers would have to share bathrooms, essentially.
A lot of
Now,
just to interrupt,
also,
just to cut in real quick, Liam. Like, what's amazing about this stuff?
yeah, no
is that
worries.
it sounds so foreign to us now, and a little bit
Oh,
uncomfortable. You
totally.
can't imagine going on what is considered like one of the most luxurious ships in the world and sharing a bathroom. But
Oh, totally.
like when you think about what the standards were like before this, where people were crammed into tiny dormitories on creaky wooden ships, like this just was a space age leap forward.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
just amazing, right? I feel like we were all blown away by the standards of luxury on offer by this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you just have to remember that just 50 years ago, people were in dormitories and being leaked on, and oh man. So just hearing you talking about it like this just reminds me of this. This was so space age.
Oh, absolutely, totally. And you have to keep in mind as well that in the past, on these old Victorian, sailing packets, there weren't even bathrooms aboard half of those packets. I mean, the best you could work with was pretty much hose water and buckets. That's pretty much what passengers had to work with back then on these old sailing packets. So for there to be these community bathrooms on these ocean liners of this era, it's an extraordinary leap forward in technology for the
Yeah, I
time.
remember an account of Olympics early voyages, maybe even a maiden voyage, where White Star Line realized they'd need to post extra night stewards because in the dark, a lot of steerage passengers had never used a flushing toilet before and didn't know how it worked, and they would just give up looking at all those pipes and levers and things and just go and do their business in a dark corner in a hallway.
Oh, totally. Exactly. And I think that really goes to show how just, how much of a leap forward this technology is. And like you said, this sort of like to have community bathrooms on these ships, it sounds silly to hear by our perspective in today's age, but back then in the early 1900s, this was absolutely revolutionary for the time.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Yeah, so what else could we find as a happy passenger on the Empress of Ireland?
So located next to these bathrooms, you would also find a sort of aft companionway in a way. Now, this aft staircase was unusually wide for the time, and it was apparently decorated with various molding pieces. It didn't have a dome on top, which was very strange. One passenger actually noted this when they were going down this aft companionway. They presumed that there would be a sort of skylight directly above it, given how wide and ample it was decorated. But instead, there was a bulb chandelier that was in place of where would be a skylight.
Wow.
Um, in the aft portion of the lower promenade deck of the main superstructure is the first class smoking room. Now, this first class smoking room was beautifully, beautifully decorated. There was plush seating adorning the room. There were skylights directly above it that was decorated with beautiful stained glass. And it's a little bit of a fast fact here. Some of the stained glass survives in fragments to this day. On the deck below, on the shelter deck, there was first class dining arrangements. Also on this deck is where we start to notice the first instances of second cabin. Now, what's interesting about the first class dining room was the amount of seating that this particular place could hold. There were 12 central tables and 16 booth tables, which held a total of 224 seats. The walls in the saloon were painted with the walls of the saloon were basically paneled with these very, very detailed moldings. There were brass outlining pieces, and they were painted primarily in a salmon color. The ceilings were painted white, and some of the decorative pieces which were seen on the walls were, of course, paneled with brass gold.
How do we? Here's a question for you. So, given that the ship and all the photographs of it in the dining saloon that I've seen are in black and white, how have we been able to gauge the color palette of the dining saloon?
So, back in the Victorian era, when advertising the interior accommodations, and this transferred over, I should note, to this particular era the Empress was introduced in.
Mm.
Usually, when advertising the interiors, they would go out of their way to essentially advertise what color these rooms were painted in. So, for example, to bring up a ship, the SS Atlantic from 1871, when they were advertising the interior accommodations of this particular ship, they essentially advertised it in a way to make sure that the reader knew that the interior accommodation was painted in a very light manner, a very light, bright, and happy way, pretty much, because a lot of ships had a bad rep for being very dark, very crammed, and just not so
Mm.
not so light and airy to sail aboard.
Yeah.
And so, in the Empress's case, Canadian Pacific essentially went out of their way to advertise how spacious and light and beautiful these interiors were, in contrast to the dark interiors that others would see on other ships of the era.
Wow. I immediately think of those 19th century German liners, which were just all wood and copper, and like very
Oh,
dark.
totally. Absolutely.
Amazing stuff.
So, going back to the saloon, even though it was painted and decorated in such a beautiful, beautiful manner, strangely, the flooring was still hardwood planking. This was kind of a weird design choice, in my opinion, considering that many of the other first class public spaces had linoleum and little silo tiles. But Canadian Pacific, as a way of disguising these crude wood floorings, they essentially placed these very beautiful and very decorative carpet runner pieces between each table, which I think really sells it, in my opinion. It really disguises the wood planking flooring. Now this dining saloon was extraordinarily unique because of the fact that it was a two-story dining saloon, which led to the music room directly above. So directly above the music or the dining saloon was the music room. Now, forward of this saloon, there was the children's saloon, which was also very charmingly decorated. Now, the children's saloon was uniquely paneled when it comes to the moldings that it received. There were several paintings that were hung up inside of the children's saloon, which depicted various scenes of. From what I can tell, these paintings depicted various scenes from children's poems that were popular from the time. Now, the walls were also similar to the dining saloon in that they were painted a salmon color. Inside this children's saloon, there were 4 tables and 15 seats and 2 couches within the space, and it was located in the very farmost point, furthermost forward in the superstructure. Now, on the shelter deck located aft, this is where we start to notice the second class accommodations. So second class aboard the Empress steamers were very equivalent to first class on other ships at the time, I want to note. Second class was provided just as much convenience as first class was, but on a more downscaled level, and without the extensive decor that may come across as overwhelming to some. Now, something that the Canadian Pacific done was they essentially advertised second class just as much as what you would see with the Cunard line. You know, they always say that the Cunard line would advertise second class because it's the best way to travel, as they would say. And this is quite similar to what Canadian Pacific would do. Now, many of the interiors on these second class spaces were very richly decorated, very richly colored in contrast to the light and airy first class spaces you would see. These second class spaces were much more darker, much more basically decorated than what you would see in first class, which is it's a very good breath of air essentially to get away from the very complex and ornate interiors that you would see with first class. Something that's also strange about second class was in the aftermost point of the vessel on the shelter deck. Second class isn't completely connected as what you would see on first class or third class on this ship. So, for an example, you would see the second class social hall, which was connected to the second class dining saloon in the aftermost point. And then if you go furthermore aft than that, there's a large promenade space, and then the second class smoking room is pretty much located in its entirely separate deck house in a way.
Hmm.
So it's not completely connected, which was very strange for the time. And it almost reminds me of ships from the Victorian era, how a lot of the public spaces were located in separate deck houses and not completely connected with each other.
That's so like indicative of society at the time. This idea that gentlemen's clubs would be separated. That men and women would retreat to different spaces after dinner. That they weren't expected to mix, and it was physically built into the ships. It's the same with early motor cars, where the passengers would be seated in the back like a horse and carriage, separated by a divider of glass, and the driver would be open and exposed in the front half of the
Mm.
car. A very, very different kind of approach to designing ships based on society. It's just amazing seeing it kind of like we would say now hard coded, built into the actual architecture of the ships themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, and of course, these types of accommodations were typically seen on the older liners. So it's very strange to see these separated accommodations being placed on these newer, more modern liners, almost as a reference to the past in a way.
Yeah, quite.
So, continuing the tour on the deck below, this is where we'd find primarily just first and second class cabins. Now, I want to go through some of these cabins real quick and describe what they were like. So there were several types of first class cabins that you could pick from aboard the Empress. You would find suites on the upper decks of the ships. Now, something that's interesting is that while they were not as extensively decorated as what you would see aboard Titanic or Lusitania, these ships had a very unique charm when it came to their suites that few liners could capture. They weren't as luxurious and over the top as what you would see with other suites, but rather they were very comfortable and very homely in a way. These types of cabins are seen on very few liners. One other liner that I could think of would come later, such as the Aquitania cabins of that specific
Yeah.
style. Um, Now, this type of style would actually evolve into a completely different genre of liner in the post-war period known as the cabin liner, which would also integrate the idea and concept of cruising, which would pioneer that concept, of course. Now, I'd like to also talk about third cabin as well. First class and second class had an equal amount of emphasis placed on them, it would seem, given that the amount of passenger capacity was roughly the same for first and second class. But when it comes to third class, over 800 passengers were designed to fit inside this particular accommodation, which was more than double the amount of passengers that first and second class could hold. Now, third class had very few public spaces in comparison to the other classes. The few public spaces third class were designed to have were very economically designed and were by no means spacious in order to essentially save on space for more third class cabins. Now, these third class cabins were very, very small and compact. A typical third class cabin had only two bunk beds within it, and on each side of these cabins were very, very basic. very basic bunks. These bunks were very rudimentary. They could be easily taken apart and cleaned. So they were very much Spartan and bare, really. Now, in between each of these bunks, you would find a simple wash basin with a provided mirror. Now, on the outboard third-class cabins, there were only one small porthole that was provided. And something that I want to note with these portholes is that these portholes were very, very small on the hull decks. Um, Unfortunately, these portholes would doom a lot of the Empress's passengers because of how small they were. Um, Disturbingly, many would suffer, severe injuries trying to scramble out of these small ports after the ship rolled onto its side. It's very, very tragic, really.
Yeah, it's awful when the design of a ship. I often think about this stuff where, the things we so lovingly recreate. And we'll get to Jack in a minute because he obviously put a lot of work into recreating the Empress, the visuals that we're seeing, the things that we're fawning over and talking about, the bits of equipment and the these things that we debate about as Titanic nerds and ship nerds in general and Empress of Ireland nerds were at one point during the sinking falling on the passengers and killing them. And the portholes, we love seeing the ship so beautifully lit and all the lights on. Like this shot here is gorgeous, but just to think that those same portholes would be responsible in a way for the deaths of dozens of people at least is yeah, I don't know. I think we all got a little bit emotional while we were working on this documentary for one reason or another, and that was one for me. So really good point, Liam.
Mhm.
We'll hear from Jack in a tick. I just wanted to get your opinion on. First of all, thanks for a great kind of virtual tour of the Empress. I can kind of see it in my mind's eye. Was
Oh,
there?
of course, of
Yeah.
course.
I mean, with these interiors, and I know you've got a lot of points that you've drafted out because I know you know a lot about this ship. You've done a lot of research. What was your favorite space on board?
My favorite space on board would probably have to be the first class smoking room. That's because of the fact that the first class smoking room is an area that's not often looked at when it comes to the Empress. When people envision the Empress of Ireland's interiors, they typically think about, the big, spacious first class dining saloon. But for me, I'm very much I'm very much interested in the more obscure spaces such as the first class smoking room, the big beautiful skylights above, the ample
Yeah,
plush furniture, etc.
you sit back there with a cigar by the fireplace. Was there a fireplace?
I don't believe there was a fireplace in the first class smoke room.
Ah, well, there you go. See, this is why we're a team effort because I just tell the stories. Thanks so much for that. Very impressive.
Oh yes,
The
of
amount
course.
of the amount of research that's gone into even that small, quick presentation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, totally.
What we'll do, we'll have a quick run through. We've been getting some super chats through. Just wanted to give a quick shout out, as always, the community's engagement and what you guys send through to us. We really appreciate. So I just wanted to have a quick run through of some of these. Road Weary said he's glad he could make it, and he did so by sending an emoji of a coffee. And you all know that I'm fired on coffee, and a lot of coffees got us through editing documentary for the Empress of Ireland. So thank you very much, Road Weary. Good to hear from you, my friend. Historic Travels is here. Mr. Samuel Pence, good to see you, Sam. He said he really enjoyed the documentary. How many people made it, and how long did it take? We'll come back to that question in just 1 minute because I'll outline how this whole thing worked. We had Trey Glavin. I'm sorry if I'm saying his surname wrong, but he says, "Hi, Mike. I'm Trey from Alabama, and I've been amazed by the work you put out, and I've been learning the history of the Titanic for a while. I love learning about other ships as well, including the Empress herself, and I'm enjoying every second of it." Well, to Alabama with love from Melbourne, Australia. Lovely to hear from you, Trey. Thanks so much for sending that in. That was a very generous $50 US super chat. It's not only that, but his first super chat on the channel. Lovely to hear from you, and thanks so much for watching. We had a lot of fun making this, and a lot of fun streaming to you guys. It's funny because I'm so used to just talking to at the audience by myself, and now I've got I've got guests here with me, which is a lot more fun. But Sam from Historic Travels asked how many people made this and how long did it take. So we are a team of really four, I'm going to say, where we have a modeler, Lucas, who makes the big exterior models of these ships. That's something that Liam does as well, actually. Liam's working on a couple ships for us at the moment. We'll get into those at a later date. Liam would then model some of the interiors. So you will have seen we made the grand staircase and the dining saloon. We really wanted to make the music room. I know Liam did, but we ran out of time. Which is incredible because, again, we did this all in 3 weeks, which I think is a pretty decent effort, especially since Mr. Jack Gibson, who we're about to hear from, was absolutely animating as hard as he could and getting these shots. So on that point, good question, Sam. Thanks for asking. I'm really excited to be able to introduce the team for the first time. For the longest time, it was just me. It was the Mike Brady Show, and it is no longer the Mike Brady Show. Now it is Oceanliner Designs, and we are a team. And the second member of that team I'd love to introduce properly and have a quick chat with is Mr. Jack Gibson. How are you, Jack?
I'm good. By the way, very fascinating listening to Liam talk about Empress of Ireland
Yeah.
because I've just learned a lot of new stuff there already from him. So really fascinating to hear about that. But
Completely.
I'm good. And it's been really nice. Having everyone get to finally know us. Because this is our first big project with you. Really, we've done a few smaller videos. Over the past few weeks, but this is our big debut really with the Empress of Ireland, and it's gone brilliantly.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with what we've managed to do
The first of
and
many.
how quickly we did it as well. The first of many, yeah. There's so much more to come from us.
Yeah.
Many more late nights to come. But it's exciting. It's very exciting.
Run us through
Um
while you were working on this, what a little bit of the work involved and kind of how it was making you feel while you were doing it.
oh yeah. Well, it's always strange working on this stuff because obviously I've been with Honor and Glory now, Titanic Honor and Glory since last November, and it's always strange when you're animating these things and you kind of get put back there and you're like, this was a real place, this was a real thing with real people in it. And like with these shots going by here, you can just see people walking along the deck, and they would have been doing this. 100 and how I mean I'm not sure how exactly how many years ago it was now, but 100 odd years ago this was real, and so it got emotional sometimes. I think we can all agree with
Yeah.
that. Um, Especially during the sinking
Yeah.
when we were going back and forward and we were kind of being like, oh, we need to make it sink this way, this lifeboat needs to go this way, and I think we all kind of it all sank in at the same time for us
Yeah.
while we were doing this, like this was real. um and I think that was always in our minds doing this because the thing we want most with this is to tell the stories of this the best we can, um, through these visuals, through your narration, through Liam's research, and through Lucas's models. And I think we did a brilliant job at it, personally. Um, so it was very emotional working on this, but I'm very proud of what we've been able to do.
Do you have a favorite shot that you made?
Oh, um,
Put you on the spot with that one. that wasn't planned.
I've got a few.
Mm,
I've got a few. But my favorite's got to be that departure sequence. I can't choose a shot from it. That whole departure sequence when there you see it right there. You've got the Blue Peter flag fluttering in the wind.
yeah.
It's just a gorgeous shot. A gorgeous sequence that I definitely didn't steal from the Titanic 1997 film. Um, but no, it was brilliant to animate. It was just I did it in one day. It was a Sunday afternoon. I remember chatting with you about it. And I was just sending you shots every 10-20 minutes was a new shot popping on the Google Drive.
Yeah.
And it was just a lovely sequence to animate because obviously the sinking is it's not it's not nice animating the sinking. So this was just a lovely, joyous thing to animate, and then I remember you sent me it all edited with the music over it and like all the sound effects. And I started welling up. I was emotional
Yeah.
watching it because I was like, this was real. This is a thing that actually happened, and we've been able to recreate it so beautifully. And in a very, very short time span, I must say as well.
Mm.
We managed to get this done super, super quickly. I'm not sure how we did it, but we did it.
Coffee.
And I'm really proud of what we got done.
Yeah, just a couple of points. So the first thing is we wanted to do a couple different things. So you may have noticed people walking up and down the decks of our ship. I think we're all really proud of that. That's something that I've wanted to do for the longest time on my videos, but didn't really know how to implement it well. Just that you need a suggestion of movement to make the ship come to life, because it's not until you have these figures or people on the decks and actually walking that you can kind of bring the ship to life in a way and see it as it would have looked, because having an empty ship, is just not, it's just not real life. The ship is only as useful as the people on it. So that was
Hmm.
all thanks to a combined effort of Liam and Jack. Liam made the people; he had made them for another project, and then put them on, and we were able to animate them. The other part of this is some of the little details that we're able to pick up in photographs. You mentioned the Blue Peter flag flying from the foremast.
Oh
On
yes.
traditionally that flag would be flown from a signal halyard from the bridge on most liners of the era. It's interesting that the Empress flew it from the main mast there. Oh, sorry, the foremast, not the main mast. The main mast is the second mast further down. It's a little bit funny to see the Blue Peter flying from the foremast, but there are photographs of it, and so we were guided a lot by actual photographs of the departure. And I have to also point out that you made the city of Quebec in like a
Oh
day.
yeah. Yeah, that was overnight, I think. I can't take full credit. I've got to give credit to Liam for that beautiful doc you're seeing. But a lot of the city, I mean, I'm sure most people here will know of Titanic: Honor and Glory, but if you played demo free, you'll recognize some of those buildings because I have that on my computer. So I just took the Belfast city and I took a few bits and I just plopped it on in this level, made a landmass that was similar to how Quebec
So
looks.
you were guided
Um, and I,
by Google Earth in that one, were you? Like just seeing the
yeah,
layout of the harbor?
yeah, I was on Google Earth. I was basically tracing the landmass. And then photos of the city I kind of based it on, but I
Yeah,
mainly just the city was more creative freedom than anything. But I
yeah,
think it looks like you've got the two smokestacks there in the background. Um, it just brings so much more life to this than obviously the ship out at sea, gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful. But seeing it in port is something completely different. Um,
yeah,
like in that shot there, look at it down at the wharf. It's just stunning. And I can't take full credit because Liam is the reason this dock exists. Titanic: Honor and Glory are the reason the city exists.
yeah.
And Lucas is the reason the Empress of Ireland model exists. So
Yeah, great
yeah.
team effort. We had a really funny super chat just come through, which could be a good segue into the next stage of our stream. Stephen Hemingway, who great to see you, Steve. He's a longtime supporter of the channel. Says, now that you're a team, does that make you the Brady Bunch? How about you go putting some cameras on the Brady Bunch? I don't mind it.
Oh, I like that.
Look, Jack, beautiful work, and we'll be all kind of commentating the real time syncing in just about less than 5 minutes.
Hmm.
So yeah, I haven't really
Thank
got a
you.
plan, or there's no like structure for the real time syncing because it happens so damn fast, right?
Oh, yeah, that was another thing that I wanted to mention as well. It's because obviously I did the real time syncing for Honor and Glory this year, and I remember when animating it, it takes a while for it to sync
Yeah,
the Titanic. You're sitting there rendering shots that last half an hour, then the ship moves about 2 degrees. You don't see it sink much. With this, I was rendering shots, and I got about 6, 7 minutes into it, and I was like, "Oh, she's capsized already." Like you don't realize how quick this thing, like, you can say 14 minutes of sanking, but you need to watch it to really understand how quickly it went down, because it was scary, like,
Yeah,
watching our animation of it, because
horrifying.
it just from it hitting, from the Storstad colliding to it capsizing, 9-10 minutes is all it took, and that is terrifying
Yeah, there was just
to
no
think
hope,
about.
no chance of getting out. And it's difficult when you're editing, for example, the real-time CG, which we're about to watch, because you have to quickly cut between shots. There's none of this, gradual process. It's just, it's there and then it isn't.
Yeah, and it's emotional as well, because obviously we had the people as well that Liam made on the decks, and I remember you'll see it in a few moments when you show the capsizing scene. But I was rendering shots during it, and I just had to take a little break, to be honest, because I was like, this was real, because like it's just emotional when you're going through this, because obviously we don't have footage of it sinking. No one. There's a few sketches online. There's paintings, but nothing like this has been done before.
Yeah.
So sitting there animating it was quite a wake up call to, like, oh, this was real, and this is like a serious thing we're doing here.
Yeah, I
Um,
have made a lot of videos, right? I think I made like 140 something, and this was the only one I've got choked up in during editing. It was the last
mhm.
scene where the shot transitions, the wreck footage, and I'll mention that in a minute. Remind me, I have to talk about the wreck footage for a second.
Oh
But
yeah,
transitioning from the wreck to showing that shot of the Empress at sunset, I got a lump in my throat and I got a little bit teary, and that's never happened before. I can, usually I'm on the job. I'm just
hmm
thinking in terms of, great, I'm going to make this video and it's very technical, but damn if I didn't get emotional. And I sent the departure scene. I hate to say this because she's going to be listening to this. I'm sorry, Mum. I sent it to my mum. Just the departure scene, and she got teary from that, because she's familiar with the story. So, yeah. We all got a bit emotional. It was great working with you on it, and all I can say is jolly well done, because it looks spectacular.
oh, thank you.
What we might do is have a quick super chat break. We'll cut back to our wonderful listeners, our audience who are listening and saying hello to all of us. Alejandro Flores Ibarra is saying, you didn't cry during Laconia or the R101, as if I'm some kind of monster. I was, I don't know. No, I didn't. I was just, it was too technical, Like I said, I'm on the job, but this one just caught me out. This one just caught me out. We had Wet Peanut left us a super chat who said, Norman Cat, please, which I don't know what it means, but nice to hear from you, Wet Peanut. Morticala says, do you enjoy an Irish coffee? And I can neither confirm nor deny that I may or may not enjoy an Irish coffee. Unknown Official said, the depth where the Titanic sank is more than 2,000 fathoms, quoted by Mr. Ismay. Fascinating how they had knowledge of deep ocean depth in the 1900s. It's an interesting topic, deserving more investigation. They could only cast a lead back in those days. Literally, they had a leadsman's platform. They'd take, measurements of depth, soundings with a literal weight. How you can cast a depth of 2,000 fathoms from a ship, I don't think you can. There was obviously some interesting kind of science going on, but I don't know how they measured the depth mid-Atlantic. Very interesting. Stephen Hemingway, we already covered that one, but I just wanted to say it again. Does that make you the Brady Bunch? Love it, but we're not the Brady Bunch because it's not the Mike Brady show anymore. I'll be the face. I'll show up and I'll do presentations, but you can expect to be hearing from Jack and Liam a whole lot more. And maybe some other team members who have joined, which will explain their purpose at a later date. But all I can say is, it's very exciting. Aussie Meteoros is a channel member. He says, Mike, do you like Earl Grey tea? And that is my favorite tea. So you've got that one spot on. And lastly, Tyjan Dean is a new member. They said, hi, Mike. I just joined as a YouTube member as a bosun. Wish I'd known sooner. Keep up the amazing videos and documentaries. They're truly gems among the community. Thank you very much for that. We are having a lot of fun. Most importantly of all, even though these are horrible, horrible tragedies, this is our passion and our hobby. And I have been motivated by working with Jack and Liam purely because of their passion and enthusiasm. And I have to say, it's pretty unmotivating when you're working by yourself. It's 4 a.m., you're rushing to render something out, and you're all alone. Versus, I know I've got two of my really good buddies, we're all in different time zones, so someone's bound to be awake, and we can all motivate each other. And it's been probably the best and most enjoyable time I've ever had working on a video with the team. So there you go. Now, the time has come for a couple things. The first thing, I actually had this scheduled a little later in the video, but I think I might show you guys a little behind the scenes featurette about the Salvation Army that goes for about 5 minutes. I might show that now because it ties in with the departure of the ship, and it might be a good way to set up the sinking. You'll see what that's about. I also wanted to mention there was meant to be a fourth panel member here today, Mr. Kevin Brown. He is a diver based out of Eastern Canada. He very, very generously gave us his wreck footage for the documentary. And so when you see pictures of the wreck, that was from him. He shot it in 4K on his camera. He actually went down there. Very, very difficult wreck, and it's claimed a lot of lives. And in fact, right after the ship sank, an actual military diver was lost. He fell off the side of the ship with his weighted boots on. And that's, her beam was maybe like 40, 50 feet. So he dropped 40 or 50 feet, and the pressure difference killed him immediately, which is incredible. It's actually quite a grisly tale, which I won't go into, but there's a book called Dark Descent, which is purely about the history of diving on the Empress of Ireland. So I really recommend reading that one. Watching out for it on eBay, Dark Descent. So Kevin risks his life to go down and dive on the Empress of Ireland. Even though it's relatively shallow, it is very dangerous because visibility is nil. It's in a river, it's silty, there's algae, the ship is covered in barnacles, it's it's on its side, very, very easy to get lost and kind of discombobulated, figure out where you are. So when I said only the best divers in the world try it, I meant it. And even then, they still lose their lives diving down on the ship. Unfortunately, Kevin was meant to give us a bit of a rundown on what it's like to dive. He has fallen down ill with COVID, I think. He's got COVID, and I think his family's caught it. So I just wanted to wish him all the best. I hope he's feeling better. Unfortunately, that was part of the reason why we had to postpone from last week. We've had to go ahead without him, but Kevin, it's not the same without you. And thank you for giving us your beautiful, beautiful wreck footage. The documentary wouldn't have been the same without it. So, on that note, I might run us through the Salvation Army documentary. This is a 5-minute featurette. It should be finished very soon. And then once we finish this featurette, we'll reconvene. And then we'll go through the real-time sinking. So please stick around. There's a quick 5 minutes on how we recorded the farewell tune that the Salvation Army plays as the Empress of Ireland leaves. Hi, my name is Mike Brady, and I'm the producer and presenter of the channel Oceanliner Designs. And today, I'm extremely excited because I'm here at my production studio, which is where I work during the day. We've got some very special guests.
I want the big puffs, mate. I don't want the big puffs. Look at this, louder and louder.
These are members of the Australian Salvation Army, and they've travelled over an hour here today to record a song. But not just any song. Almost 110 years ago, and on the other side of the world, their forebears, members of the Canadian Salvation Army, almost 170 in total, had stepped excitedly aboard the Oceanliner Empress of Ireland, bound for England.
1914 was a big year for the Salvation Army. It was the International Congress in London, where the Army took over about half of London. They had all these venues built, and people came from all over the Salvation Army world. They'd take their bands and their singing groups and wore national dress. It was just a big event. The Canadian contingent in particular, they took the Canadian Staff Band. Excitement levels were high. It was a chance really to showcase what your country Salvation Army looked like.
It's no secret that the 1800s were a tough time for many. Poverty was rife, and workers lived in appalling conditions. So many were busy just trying to eke out their own living and survive that it seemed as if nobody cared about the most downtrodden and unfortunate. But then, in the mid-1800s, a new church and charitable organisation began to provide disaster relief and aid to society's most down and out. And that organisation was the Salvation Army.
The Salvation Army in the last few years of the 19th century and the early years of the 20th century was spreading around the world, and social work was just beginning in a very professional form, a more managed form. So people wanted to showcase that sort of work. It set the foundations for Salvation Army social work for the next 100 years.
The Salvation Army had a strong presence in Canada, so when the opportunity arose to send its contingent out to Britain for the conference, the organisation jumped at the chance. The group of 167 was led by beloved Commissioner David Rees. As the Empress of Ireland set off from the quay with thousands of passengers on board, the band assembled on deck and played a final hymn, God Be With You Till We Meet Again. Just a few short hours later, disaster struck. The Empress of Ireland had entered a fog bank and collided with a cargo ship. It sank in just 14 minutes. It was late. Most of the passengers were asleep, and they just didn't have the time to get out. In the end, only 8 of the Salvation Army contingent were left alive, and 1,012 people died with the ship. Today, we've invited Major David Eldridge and other members of the Australian Salvation Army to honour their lost comrades and play again the hymn last heard as the ship left Quebec.
I'll count you in. 3, 2, 1.
The song we played today, God Be With You Till We Meet Again, is a very poignant song when you think about it in the context of the Empress of Ireland story. It was often a benediction for meetings. If the big meeting had finished, they'd sing and play that song until people got back together and gathered again. Because they were travelling off to the Congress, the band would have played it on the deck, because that was the blessing almost, that we'll see you again and God will be with us until we see you again. Tragically, the reunion for most of those people would be in another world, not in the world that they lived in.
Powerful stuff. Yeah. People in the in the stream saying they're getting emotional. I think we were just getting a little bit emotional watching that again. Yes, it is powerful stuff. It is sad. Was I crying? No, you were crying. Tragic tale. And again, they would, I want to emphasize the point. This was an era when nobody cared about the poor. Very, very few. And, these people were doing good work. So, just an interesting little side point about that whole thing. There is actually 2 or 3 versions of the hymn, God Be With You Till We Meet Again. It's a little bit like a Nearer My God to Thee situation on the Titanic. I chose that version, although I have heard Canadian bands play the second version, which is a lot more upbeat and maybe kind of militaristic. You guys can hear it if you look it up. I do like that version of the hymn, God Be With You, because it's a lot more mournful and like a lot of you guys are saying, you can just get emotional just listening to it. You don't even need to know the context of the sinking of the Empress of Ireland. It'll still just make you sad and maybe long for home and your family. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to the members of the Salvation Army Geelong for traveling an hour to inner city Melbourne to record that, and it's in the documentary. So thank you again. We will have more uses for that song. We'll be doing a lot more Empress stuff in the future. We'll get into that at a later date. But now we have to transport ourselves back in time to the night, the early morning, really, of May 29th, 1914. And I'd invite Jack and Liam to kind of freeform commentate this with me, because this is the sinking of the Empress of Ireland in real time. And what we're seeing now is the Empress stopped in fog. If you believed both captains of the ships involved in this collision, that very famously the collision would have happened while both ships were stopped and pointing in opposite directions to one another. So something happened that night in the fog, and to this day, it's not entirely sure what. You can blame the Storstad or you can blame the Empress. I blame the St. Lawrence River. What do you guys think?
In my opinion, oh sorry, go ahead, Jack.
Sorry. It's a horrible. I think it's a case of bad luck, really. Just everything came together to create just the worst conditions for a ship. I don't think any captain, I don't think any crew of any ship could have handled the situation any differently, because it's a situation that just no crew or captain's designed to deal with. I mean, you're stuck in the fog, you can't see anything around you. The only thing you can see is maybe your bow of your ship.
Yeah.
And even then, that's covered in fog. Completely horrible situation to be stuck in for everyone on that ship.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree.
And the St. Lawrence is well known for its fog as well. And so I have to agree with Jack as well. I think that it was just a terrible mix of just bad luck in general, really, especially with the fog.
It's interesting that big steamers like this, you know, for a long time, smaller ships have been going up and down the St. Lawrence. And a smaller ship is more nimble. You can get her moving faster. The Empress was stopped. She did not have momentum on her side. And to maintain the ability to steer on a big steamer like this, you need to have headway. But Kendall thought as captain that it would be best to stop. And it's hard to sit back in 2023 and blame him for doing that. And I kind of touched on it in the video, but I don't want to blame him, to be honest with you. Because to his absolute horror, looming out of the fog are the lights of the Storstad. Now, Kendall claimed that he saw white foam at the bow of the ship, indicating that she was moving very quick, that the Storstad hadn't slowed down. I would point out as well, they spotted each other at 8 miles distant. The Storstad was loaded with about 11,000 tons of coal. It would take her a long time to stop, and a long time to slow down. Kendall has rung down to his engines to try and get them moving full speed ahead. Here's a piece of trivia that I found from the inquiry. It took an hour for the Empress to go from stop to full speed. There was no hope. And here we have an impact.
And, you know, many people were sleeping at this time as well. And especially, like I mentioned in my interior portion, I described how the first class sleeping arrangements were in the center portion of the vessel in the hull. So, you know, just knowing that all of these people just then were killed from this collision, it's terrible, really.
Yeah. And it's just impossible to describe almost. I mean, we say tons of water begin to flood the Empress. It wasn't, you know, this was 250,000 liters per second that now is going into this ship. It was like the river was on the outside of the Empress of Ireland, but now it's on the inside. It's as simple as that. It doesn't...
And, you know, you just...
Yeah.
Oh, I was just about to say, you have to realize as well that all of these, you know, boiler room workers well below the water line. You know, they stood not a single chance when this collision took place. The sheer amounts of water that surged into the ship, it's just that there's no running away from it.
No. We got criticism for not showing the Empress move from that collision, that she should have bucked and rolled over to the left, but she didn't move because there was just no resistance. The bow of the Storstad just plunged into it as if she was made out of tissue paper, and the Empress didn't move. So people were awakened not by a collision, but by the just sudden inrush of water, or those people who were rolled out of their bunks. And as we were saying, there were people on the port side of the ship who slept through the entire ordeal and woke up only when they were thrown out of their bunks onto their side as the ship rolled, which is shocking to think about. The timer has already started, and we've only got 13 minutes left.
It's terrifying. And another thing as well, this isn't like Titanic where it struck at 11:40 and some people were still awake, people were getting ready for bed. This is nearly 2 in the morning. People are fast asleep. Hardly anyone's awake at this point. The crew's awake, the boiler and engine room workers are awake. That's about it. Most people are fast asleep, and when you've been woken up in the middle of the night by something like this, you're not gonna immediately know what to do. So people were just completely dazed by this. It came out of absolute nowhere, and within 13 minutes, the ship was gone.
Like could not be less prepared. You know, their defenses were down. They were their first night on the ship. No one had explored. What is happening as we're speaking is down below. People are already hit with a tidal wave of water. You can imagine that there would be so much water, I'm sure, that partitions and bulkheads made out of timber between the staterooms would be flattened. The night stewards were tasked with a few things. Polishing the shoes of the passengers and that kind of banal hotel room service stuff. But they also had a very important role in shutting the watertight doors and lighting the emergency lamps. The emergency lamps in the corridors, by the way, oil lamps. This wasn't like Titanic, where you didn't have an emergency light set of electrical lights. You had oil lamps running down the hallways. What is happening right now is you have parties of men trying to shut the watertight doors with the water absolutely roaring around their feet, then their knees, then their waists, and they just could not get those doors shut. Not a single night steward from third class survived, and those on the port side were really the only ones who made it out.
It's extremely grim to think about, but the third class stewards, their sleeping arrangements were located in the central point near the collision spot, and it's very grim to talk about and think about, but you know, they found the remains of all of these stewards still inside of their sleeping arrangements after the ship sank, so they couldn't get out. None of them could get out.
Divers to the wreck call it, I think, the bone room or the boneyard. Just in the short amount of time that we've been talking about this, the lights have gone out. And so now, I mean, we've got it lit nicely so you can see what's going on. But it was a young moon, but this is already, I mean, it's pitch black outside. It defies belief. And I guess what's amazing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jack, but it blew me away that they already have the boats run out. You had actually encountered this problem when you were animating radial davits, Jack, is that you have to move one end of the boat inboard to swing it out, right?
Yeah, like, this is not Titanic with the Welland davits, where they're easy to get out, they're pretty easy to lower the boats. These are old lifeboat davits. They're not good. You see it on other ships as well. Lusitania's davits were a nightmare to get out. And you see it here as well. You see lifeboats here on the port side. The hull is already listing so much that boats are just capsizing as they go down. No one is surviving on the port side.
Yeah.
On the Empress of Ireland here.
The port boats are immediately useless. And it's these starboard boats now that they just have to quickly run out. So port boat, lifeboat crews abandon their posts and go to the starboard boats and start loading them with people. I cannot emphasize enough how well drilled this crew was. I am blown away that many of them were already on deck before Kendall blew the whistle and gave the general emergency alarm. They were already at their lifeboat stations getting these boats run out. And that blows me away, that they had almost every starboard side lifeboat ready to go, either launched or almost launched, before the ship lurched and rolled onto her side. Blows me away. Unfortunately, though, the technology, like you said, was very clunky. Radial davits were they could quickly launch a boat, but unfortunately in this case with the Empress, they launched them too quickly. Boat 15, we just saw, they were lowering, she capsizes and then floats away upside down with people clinging to the roof. Boat 1 broke free, swings out, and throws passengers away. There's a video of the Aquitania doing a lifeboat drill with these types of radial davits online. If you look up Aquitania lifeboat drill, you'll see that you'll be horrified that the ends are launched at different speeds, and it just looks like absolute chaos. This just blows my mind, just seeing this happening. Again, I talked for 2 minutes about that, and we are at a different stage of the sinking now because water is about to pour into the open promenade deck there. Unbelievable.
And we can see here as well, boats are already getting in the water. Thank God they got them out that quickly, because if this was with Titanic, it took an hour for the first boat to get in the water. Lusitania, it was about 12 minutes in that they got the first boats out in the water. This is 5 minutes in, pretty much, and there's already 2 boats in the water, and another 2 coming down right now. It's extraordinary how well trained they were, and thank God they were.
Yeah, well said. The other point is that it's freezing. I mean, the water's, this is early summer, and it is very cold still. The St. Lawrence had actually only just broken its ice, the month prior, which is amazing. So this is very, very cold water. You can just see the water pouring in now, just beginning to roar into the promenade deck there. That must have been terrifying to see.
And while we're seeing all these lifeboats launch, we have to keep in mind as well that there are hundreds of people still trapped inside the ship as she is rapidly starting to keel over onto her side at this point. I mean, when the power went out, the interior was pitched just into sheer darkness. It was very, very dark on the outside, obviously, but you have to keep in mind that in these interior maze of corridors and companionways, it's just... You can't see anything. You're basically entombed in this steel coffin.
Yeah, someone just commented, Sabrina, saying that she usually watches our videos with her kids, and unfortunately they're used to disaster videos, but this one shocked them, and I think it shocked us too. I agree. There's literally just a few seconds remaining before it's all over for the Empress. As soon as she loses that fight with buoyancy, that's it. Already we've got water lapping over the decks. We might just let the animation play without talking now for a minute, because this has to be seen to be believed. Just like that, it's all over. A lot of things happened very quickly there. Boat 7 was never got away. The ship's officer, Jones, was struggling to swing her out and lower it, but he never got the chance. The ship sank, and Boat 7 was still attached. We believe Boat 11 was the lifeboat that was crushed. We know one boat was crushed on the starboard side. It was described as if a piece of the superstructure had broken loose. That was from an eyewitness in pitch black. Very difficult to make out what was going on. In our animation, we've chosen to show one of the ship's smokestacks funnels crushing the lifeboat, because There are accounts actually of some people and boats getting tangled up in the ship's antenna. The rigging between the two masts suddenly comes crashing down, of course. And people in the water and the lifeboats now have these heavy cables come whipping down out of nowhere. Horrifying. And now we're at the stage of the sinking where what you were describing earlier, Liam, is that people are now trying to get free out of their cabins through these portholes.
And yeah, a lot of these people as well, a lot of these people that are trying to free themselves from the portholes, they never even were able to exit their cabins before the ship completely turned onto its side. I mean, it's only been about 10 minutes, really, from the collision to the ship completely turning onto her side. There really was no time to escape.
Yeah. It's horrifying. I mean, one very interesting discovery through this process was the night life buoys with these standard looking life buoys that had a chemical flare that the Lusitania had. A few other ships had these as well. On contact with the water, I believe it was a mixture of off the top of my head, calcium something or other. I forget. It was in one of my other videos. I've forgotten the exact chemical composition, but on contact with water, they illuminate. And so it cast this creepy blue light over what was playing out very, very slowly. The ship loses the buoyancy through the port side. Forgot to mention a little earlier, because it was all happening so quickly, but a lot of these portholes were left open. The night steward's job was partly to close portholes, but the ships back then used to run very warm, depending on which ship. There was no real temperature regulation. The thermotanks, which provided hot air, would usually be blasting in very, very warm air. And so it seems a lot of these portholes were left open, and I think nighttime stewards maybe didn't want to deal with unruly passengers and annoyed passengers that forced them to close their portholes. It just meant the water could rush in a lot faster. And now, at this stage of the sinking, the air is rushing out the port side, and the ship's just losing her buoyancy and slowly sinking. And it's horrifying to watch. This is, well, it was described a little bit like a tide, a slowly rising tide at a beach. Slowly creeping up the hull.
You can see all the debris from the ship, what would have been attached to the deck, all the equipment, the cargo booms, the derricks, all of them just lying in the water now. People would have been hit by them. Some people would be clinging to them now, the only thing that could keep them out of that water. And we can see now the Empress is gone.
Even the way you just said that, Jack, got me a little bit choked up. The Empress is gone.
Mm-hmm. It sank in 14 minutes.
And we were describing just now, throughout this real time, how the ship went down and the events that took place during which, but there's so much information that we just had to leave out because of how quickly the ship just vanished beneath the surface.
Yeah. Yeah, something.
It all just happened way too quickly.
Yeah. Everything about this sinking scares me a little. It's obviously the experience would have been scary, but just the idea that the fog creeps in at the moment the two ships spot each other, and then as soon as the Empress sinks, it clears up and disappears. I said it in the documentary and I'll say it again. It was like it was designed. It was like somebody, some evil spirit was out to sink the Empress of Ireland that night. It is genuinely bizarre. And as with all ship sinkings, all you're left with the next day is people and wreckage. That was once one of the most beautiful ships in the world. That's all that's left. What do you think, Jack? Any final thoughts on that? I mean, I know you were animating this stuff and getting emotional during the sinking. Obviously, it's a bit different to read events on paper and then animate them. Were there any things that surprised you or that you learned from that process of the sinking?
I think the only thing that I think it's just how quick it goes. That's just something you don't get from reading it or document from obviously we got our documentary out, but watching it in real time, just all that audio is just it just kind of shows how quickly it went, how fast it went, how little time people had to really, from being fast asleep in their beds on this brand new ship that they didn't know, they'd been on it for a few hours. They went from that to the ship completely on its side in literally about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know how anyone got off, to be honest.
Yeah. I think we showed the numbers a little earlier, but the proportion of casualties was unbelievably weighted. It was majority passenger survival rate. And by the way, more passengers on the Empress of Ireland died than passengers on board Titanic. Purely because, and this wasn't selfishness on the part of the crew with the Empress, it's just that the crew were well drilled, like I said, and they were ready. They were up on deck, they were doing their jobs. And even those guys down in the engine room, they could get out through a lot of emergency escape ladders leading out through the boiler casings and up through the engine room casings and things like that. So even way down in the hull, there was a way to get out. But it was these poor passengers who just didn't have a hope. And even men sent below deck to try and rouse them from their sleep and get them out. If they'd followed that order, as soon as the lights snapped out, they would have been lost. So,
And like you said as well, it was the passengers' first night aboard the ship as well. And so, unlike the crew who would have known the ship basically from the back of their hand, really, these passengers, it's their first night. As for many of them, it's their first time sailing as well. And they just have no idea where they are.
yeah, this is, again, like a little bit of a personal story. I don't know if you guys are interested in this stuff, I'm sorry. But I just took my mum on a cruise on the Queen Mary 2. And I was so excited. And, it was like literally a lifetime's dream. I mean, I was 7 years old, I think, obsessing over the construction of the... Oh, no, I was 9. About 9, yeah. Obsessing over the construction of the Queen Mary 2 and boring mum to death about it. Flash forward 20 years and we're standing on it, which was beautiful. But we both got a little bit emotional at one point because I had this realization that feeling of excitement, that being able to take my loved one somewhere, go somewhere new, be part of this experience on board a ship, which is so exciting, it would be the equivalent of that night, the Queen Mary 2 suffering some kind of catastrophic incident and then being thrown onto its side. Mum and I are in different staterooms. She was a deck up at about 100 feet forward of where I was. If that ship rolled 15 degrees, 20 degrees onto her side, already it's going to be very difficult. My priority is going to be finding Mum, not going topside, getting to the lifeboats. That would be the last thing I'd be thinking of. And so no wonder, you were saying earlier, Liam, men and women, single men were birthed forward away from families. Families were often separated into their different rooms. There was a very serious kind of approach to separating classes and different types of people. Just the horror of women and children in these scenarios, their men birthed further forward, their first thought would be trying to find their families. And
Yeah,
no wonder
exactly.
they didn't make it topside.
Mm-hmm. And in the way they designed this segregation system, the ladies, they would have been located further aft and on the starboard side, according to Empress plans. And so, obviously, when the ship rolled onto its starboard side, so it's just, I couldn't even begin to imagine just what was going through, the gentlemen's minds on the other side as they were trying to get over to the other side of the ship.
Yeah, a lot of human dramas and stories played out that night that we'll never know about. A lot of acts of heroism, a lot of tragedies. It wasn't Titanic. There wasn't this slowly flooding stage where this could all play out. This happened. 1,000-something people fought for their lives, tried to save loved ones, and died in pitch black, and we'll just never know about it. We'll never know what happened. We'll never know about those who stepped aside so someone else could make it through, those who lit a match so that they could try and guide people out of the staircase while it was on its side. It's just one of those things we'll just never know. So this was our small tribute to that story and the ship itself. Often it's easy to get caught up in the ship part and forget the people part. We definitely wanted to make it more people-focused this time. Now, to lighten the mood of proceedings somewhat, we are getting towards the end of our stream. Speaking of people, I do want to cast some attention quickly to our lovely audience. You've been commenting and leaving chats the whole time. I've been seeing them as they come in. I haven't been able to engage usually as I would on a live stream, so I appreciate you guys taking the time to write to us. We've got a few super chats. We have one from CSX Girl 1822. So I don't know why that took me so long to read. Hello, Mike, Jack, and Liam. Wanted to say well done on such a historically accurate animation. I noticed that the Empress never sent up any flares. Did Captain Kendall not have time? Would they have been useless in the fog? I would hesitate to say, yeah, maybe a little column A, a little of column B. He was thrown from the bridge. He was standing on the left-hand side, the port side bridge wing, shouting orders through his megaphone, and he just got thrown out of the bridge. I don't think they had the time. What do you think, guys?
I have to agree as well. I think it's probably a fine mix of both. I mean, when the Empress was going down, it was absolute pandemonium. You know, with Titanic, when that ship was going down, you didn't really see any loss of human order, you know, until the very end of the sinking. It was a very orderly sinking, really. And so, you know, when the Empress was going down, it was just absolute pandemonium. And I'm sure with all of that panic that was going on, you know, it was just there was so much going on. You know, launching these flares was the last thing on his mind, especially because the Storstad was just nearby. Why launch flares when, you know, there's this ship that's nearby?
Yeah, it's a good idea. Rockets were used typically. There's a lot of examples of it in the Victorian age of ships that they just thought they were all alone and in a panic were firing off rockets to try and get anybody's attention. I think Kendall knew that there was a ship out there, and bearing in mind they're only a short-ish distance from the riverbank, from the shore. I feel bad calling it a riverbank because someone commented and they made a very good point. It's more like an inland sea. I mean, the St. Lawrence River is shockingly wide. At the point at which the Empress sank, I think it's about 50 kilometers wide, which is maybe like 20 or 30 miles across, which is no joke. So yeah, really good question. Nick Tallfox said, you happen to synchronize the time of the sinking with my time zone. Thank you for making a long night shift more bearable. We may have made your long night shift more bearable. Hopefully we didn't make it too upsetting. I feel like it's a very sad story. I think people working might be breaking out into tears. I hope you're able to get your work done. But thank you for tuning in. Sabrina commented saying, yeah, we watched your video on this. My kids 11 and 9 are used to stories on ships and disasters, but oops, guess it hit them hard because they were so upset. Still, they and I think your video was amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if we went too hard. It is an upsetting story. I don't know if you even need like content warnings on this stuff, but again, I don't know if we're desensitized to Titanic, but the movie is very violent at the end. I watched it when I was like 3 or 4 by accident. And, you know, right at the end when people are falling off each other, and it's pretty horrible, actually. So, yeah, I don't know if we're getting desensitized to that stuff, seeing it in a different context on a different ship. Yeah, interesting. Random Stuff said, would the port lifeboats float away if the crew unfastened them from the deck before the ship capsized? These boats are interesting because they are made of steel. And they do have buoyancy tanks in them, but they would have been waterlogged, and they wouldn't have had enough buoyancy to probably float away. And in fact, some boats, at least one, is still attached to the wreck of the Empress. In the 90s, it was still attached via a fall. So the rope still held it to the ship's davit. And disturbingly, there was a skeleton, famously a skeleton inside that lifeboat. Whether or not that was a person that dropped from the surface above and landed in the lifeboat by coincidence, or if that was somebody who had actually died in the lifeboat is unknown. But I will point out that the majority of bodies retrieved, and there were only very, very few of them retrieved from the surface, 188 of the 1,012 odd who died, had physical injuries, not a lot of drownings, not a lot of hypothermia, just a lot of broken bones, crushing from, I think the boats themselves weighed about 2 or 3 tons. The collapsible rafts, and we actually haven't spoken about these, but this ship, similarly to Titanic, carried the same kind of collapsibles, which were like basically just wooden rafts with canvas sides that could be raised. She had a collapsible under every lifeboat. That was I noticed that was actually one thing we missed. I forgot to put collapsibles under the lifeboats, but she had a lot more on deck, and these all came crashing down. I mean, they weighed tons, 20-foot boats made out of wood crashing down. It would have been just raining debris, and yeah, a lot of people suffered quite horribly from these things that were falling down on them. It's just awful to think about. So yeah, if the boats were loosened, they probably would have come crashing down, the portside boats, if they didn't already, or just sunk with the ship, I am sure. We had Hammer and Hearth with an interesting question saying, "Hello, Mike, Jack, and Liam. What confirmed instances of sinking-related boiler explosions are you aware of? They seem to be much feared in the period, but I've yet to find a documented example." I was just reading about one, and I've forgotten the name of the ship. Was it the Príncipe de Asturias, Liam?
Yes, the Príncipe de Asturias suffered multiple boiler explosions, and also there's another ship called the Príncipe Umberto as well. That ship as well sank as a result from boiler explosions following the torpedo attack as well.
So we're talking sudden inrush of water, and extreme pressure build-up and reaction to temperatures. I mean, the Príncipe de Asturias was opened up like a tin can and sank in, 4 minutes?
Oh yeah, 4 minutes. And you have to keep in mind as well that, with these ships, Titanic for an example as well, the boiler room workers, they had time to release the steam to prevent these boiler explosions. But the Príncipe de Asturias, I mean, this ship just crashed right up and pretty much beached herself onto a partially submerged rock and then was ripped away. So her entire bottom was basically gutted out. And so that sudden inrush of water, against those searing hot boilers, it's just, the ship had no chance, really.
Yeah, it's a lot of physics at play, a lot of force, a ton of force. The pressure that these boilers are creating just to power these ships is immense. So without being able to vent it, having the temperatures reacting, you got to remember as well that the plating of ships is relatively thin. It's surprisingly thin. They look big and solid, but they're actually quite squishy, for want of a better term. So as soon as you get extreme forces, they'll blow out the side and only hasten the sinking. So yeah, it was definitely a valid fear. Good question. Daniel's Weather Marine Station had given us a super chat, nice little donation of $1. Thank you very much. Every little bit helps. Stephen Hemingway said, had the bulkheads been laid out the same as Titanic and of the same type, would it have given her more time? To which I say, yes. Part of the Empress's problem is that, similarly to Lusitania, she had longitudinal bulkheads in places, which separated the ship. Not just, she had your standard transverse bulkheads which ran across the width of the ship, but longitudinal bulkheads run lengthways down the length of the hull of the ship. They confine your flooding to only that side for a while the watertight doors are open and water can flood elsewhere. It results in an immediate list to the side that the damage is on. In the Empress's case, the list was so severe that she capsized. Were she to have watertight bulkheads, purely transverse watertight bulkheads, it's probable that the flooding lower down in these huge cavernous boiler room and engine rooms would have been more even, possibly giving the crew time enough to launch and lower the portside boats. But whether or not they would be able to get passengers into those boats is another question, because they just didn't have a lot of time. And part of the Empress's problem, she was a 2-compartment ship, meaning that she was designed to stay afloat with any 2 of her compartments flooded. Those boiler rooms that were hit, that was just the worst case scenario. They were like the biggest open spaces in the ship. They were providing, obviously, power for the dynamos, creating the electricity, but her margin for error, the margin for, yes, she was a 2-compartment ship. Were those 2 compartments to be flooded? it would take very, very, very little more flooding to completely sink it, even in a best case scenario. So that was possibly a design flaw with the Empress sisters, is that the margin for error was too low. And in the case of the Empress of Ireland, obviously the longitudinal bulkheads did not help, but the portholes open on the starboard side of the ship just immediately started letting more and more water in, and resulted in an enhanced rate of flooding. So it's pretty horrifying. If she had electric watertight doors, maybe she would have stayed afloat. That's an interesting one. I don't know. The final super chat of the evening is from Papa Ghost 74, who simply says, "Thank you for a great stream, guys." Smiley face. Which is really nice to hear. I think we're all a bit nervous about this one, weren't we, guys?
Oh yeah, I've been up all day thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, am I gonna be able to speak well? Is everything gonna go all right? But this has gone perfectly.
And this is my first stream as well, so I can't say I haven't been nervous about it. But it's been fun. It has been.
Absolutely. I am thrilled to be able to talk with you guys and have you here to join me. Again, a lot more structured, a lot more formal than a usual stream. It'd be great to do another stream with you guys, just kind of like a casual chat in the future. Maybe the next couple of weeks we'll just do a normal Oceanliner Design stream and have a bit more fun with it. We did have fun making the Empress of Ireland in a respectful way, but it's not a particularly upbeat project. So yeah, we've got a lot of other things on the stove at the moment. One of them I'm just dying to tell you guys about, but I can't. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
No comment. I can't even think of a clever clue. We'll just leave it. But we'll tell you guys about that at a later date. There's a lot of things we're working on. I might just put it onto something a little more happy, maybe like the daytime scene. Yeah, these shots are nice. Any closing thoughts? I'll go down the list. Liam, any final word?
In this particular era, there are three major sinkings that took place. You have Titanic, you have Lusitania, and then you have the Empress of Ireland. These three are pretty much the big ones of this particular era. And of these three, the Empress of Ireland is, the least known of the three. But in spite of that, I think the Empress is, in my opinion, the most horrifying sinking, and one of the most horrifying sinkings I think I've ever had the displeasure of having to learn about. I mean, with Titanic, she took 2 hours, nearly 3 hours to go down. Lusitania, she sank in 18 minutes. But, with Lusitania, a lot of these passengers, they were aware of the threat of there being a torpedo. I mean, this was the subject of discussion aboard that ship throughout the voyage. And when the torpedo initially did strike, they were, at least to some extent, somewhat prepared. But with Empress, nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew that, there would be this risk. No one knew that there would be a collision that would take place. It's just so sudden, so unheard of. And what resulted was one of the most just disturbing, horrific sinkings that I think I've read about. And so I think it's very important that we don't forget about this tragedy, because like I said, in spite of these three shipwrecks being the largest ones of this particular time period, the Empress is one that, we often look over. The Empress is something that we don't really look into. And so I think it's very important that we never forget all of these lives that were lost aboard the ship. We never forget some of the, all of these heroes that we'll never be able to hear about. I just think it's very important that we never forget the lives that were lost aboard Empress of Ireland.
Well said. Well said. And might I also say, jolly good job in helping bring her to life. We didn't get to show in this stream the interiors that you made, but yeah, that staircase, just seeing it in color was quite moving.
And it's been an absolute honor to be able to recreate the ship as well. Before I worked on this project, I didn't really realize how beautiful the interiors of the Empress were. I mean, I knew what they looked like, but upon examining these images and using them as references for these 3D models, it's just, looking closer at them, I've gained a
Mm,
whole new appreciation for what the Empress sisters were.
yeah, and we have more plans for the Empress sisters. This is not the last you will hear of the Empress of Ireland or the Empress of Britain on this channel. We have other things in store. And so, just as a side note, actually, were we not earlier talking about your two favorite ships from the 19th century?
Ah, yes, we were. We were.
We had a couple of good guesses in the chat. Some of them were very close. I think one of them might have got one. One of them, of course, being
Mm.
dot dot
My
dot.
absolute favorite is the Atlantic.
She's your baby.
She is absolutely my baby. I've been researching this ship for several years, and I've just been really just going at it with this ship and trying to put together not only the complete history of the steamer Atlantic, but the design of the ship as well. And it's really just been the design that I've been piecing together and trying to bring back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating story. We touched on it in one of our videos last, but we'll do some more. And the second
Oh,
being,
absolutely. Oh, this is my second favorite as well. Would be a ship that I can guarantee nobody has really heard of, given how little information is known about the ship. Her name is a ship called the Hungarian. Now, the Hungarian was an Allen liner that was built in 1858 and finished in 1859, but unfortunately, on her third voyage, she ran into rocks and very, very quickly sank with the loss of every single person aboard it. And her story is very similar to the Atlantic. All these passengers, they went up into the rigging waiting for rescue to arrive, but that rescue would never come. And it's just a terrible, terrible story. And I've had the honor to discover many, many new things regarding this wreck.
yeah, very exciting. We'll. Oh, sorry, you cut out for me. I hope I wasn't talking over you. Sorry, mate. Cut out.
Oh, no, 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 no worries. Go ahead. Sorry, Mike.
No, I was just going to say we're all really excited to be talking about that ship. If you're interested in these stories, you might want to stick around on our channel a little while longer. If you're interested, go and have a read about the SS Hungarian. There's not much out there, but maybe soon there will be. Who knows? Thanks again for that, Liam. Well done. Jack.
Of course. And again, it's been an absolute honor, Mike.
Oh, mate, it's the pleasure is all mine. I'm so thrilled to actually be able to work with people who are enthusiastic about this stuff with me, and yeah, I'm honestly, yeah, it's been an absolute highlight. So thank you. I would pass over to Jack, who has patiently waited for us to give him his final word. What are you? How did you want to sign off, Jack? What's on your mind?
I don't know. It's been a long, but it's been a good stream. And it's been a good few weeks working on this. I think going back to the favorite ships thing though, I've got to say I've always got Titanic at number one, got the Olympic class up there. Lusitania's always number two, but I've never really had a number three. And I've got to say I think Empress of Ireland's got to be my number three now, because
Yeah,
she's just such a beautiful little liner, beautiful, beautiful interiors, and such a horrible ending to such a beautiful little ship. Like Liam referred to her as a B tier liner, and she was a B tier liner. She's an A-star liner to me. She's just beautiful, beautiful little vessel.
yeah. Well said. I feel very, very similarly. Yeah, it feels bad calling her a B tier liner. Goodness, when you compare the Canadian Pacific Line ships that went before her, which was so simple.
Oh yeah.
That's we learned a lot making this. Thanks again, Jack. Again, what can I say? Standing ovation. I'm sure if we were in front of a live audience, he'd be getting a standing ovation for these animations. It's very, very cool.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, it's still a bit bizarre that I'm working with you, because again, when your first video, I don't want to say I was the first, but I remember seeing it in my feed. It was only a few hours after it came out, and I was like, oh, Lusitania tour, wow. And now I'm working alongside you. It's bizarre. My brain's still like thinking, I'm working with him. What the like what? Like it's bizarre.
You know what they
but
say, Jack?
I
Don't
love
meet your heroes. There were times when we were making this where I was thinking, oh, he's gonna hate me when I sent you like a list of to dos and things like that. I just thought, oh, he's gonna tell me to jump.
Because we're on the we've gone over this when we've been making this. We're all our dream team. I like to call us.
Hmm.
We're all on the same brainwave. We all just we send stuff in and it's perfect.
Yeah.
It doesn't need revisions. Nothing needs changing. It's just everything we send in just is perfect.
Yeah.
And it's an honor, really.
Thank you, Jack. I feel the same way, and I think the last thank yous need to go towards the Salvation Army of Geelong and Melbourne for recording that beautiful piece, and the volunteers of the HMAS Castlemaine, the ship. You might have noticed there were some shots of steamship engines in the documentary. That was aboard HMAS Castlemaine. Beautiful museum ship here in Melbourne. If you live in Australia and you haven't been seeing the Castlemaine, what are you doing? What are you doing? Just go. She's just sitting there. She's waiting for you. Let's go and have a look. On that bombshell, I would also like to thank the audience. We've had a continuous viewership of something like 400 people all night. I know it's late in some parts of the world. Just wanted to say thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your comments. This wasn't a normal kind of stream where we could engage as usual, but we promise we'll be doing more of those. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening. And as always, stay safe and stay happy. And we'll see you again next time.